How's it going? I'm Dr. J, and today we're back with a new Samus matchup chart. Over the past few months, the meta has changed, especially with patches and DLC, and matchups are starting to get a bit more fleshed out as things become more optimized. Real quick, I just want to mention that there are still a few days left on my Kickstarter for metanet.gg, which is a network and marketplace where you can build a profile and interact with forums. And what I think is really cool about it is that you can build your own store on your profile where you can buy and sell things like esports lessons, custom controllers, artwork, collectibles, and really anything that has to do with gaming. Even if we don't reach the Kickstarter goal, I would still really appreciate any support you could give to it, even if it's just sharing it or telling your friends, because eventually I will be making this site a reality no matter what. Okay, so now that that's all out of the way, let's get to the matchup chart. First off, we have Game & Watch. I'll be honest, I completely slept on Game & Watch in the first few months of Ultimate, but it's pretty clear to me that Game & Watch is one of, if not the best counters to Samus there is. His bucket, up B, juggling, knockout potential, and ledge trapping tools are all really difficult to beat. The bucket is obviously a mind game, and you can purposely fill the bucket in order to projectile camp easier, but this is honestly a pretty gimmicky tactic that won't always work. You need to be extremely wary of his out of shield options, particularly up B, and you should definitely avoid being caught above Game & Watch. Probably his biggest strength versus Samus is his insane juggling game and ability to not be juggled easily. But the good news is that he's extremely light, so if you can land a clean back air, nair, down tilt, or F smash, he will die extremely early. His advantage state is fantastic, so focus on keeping stage control and resetting to neutral rather than being predictably aggressive so you don't get caught out. Zair is pretty good here, but yeah, this is probably Samus's worst, or at least one of her worst matchups. Mii Gunner is probably the best character in the game when it comes to camping out Samus. They're really slow and have poor disadvantage, but the fact that they also have charge shot and missiles, which are even more powerful than Samus's, and they have a reflector or Ness absorbing down B thing, or bombs, and a ridiculously long range up air, and a fair that works as a Zair, but maybe even better, means that fighting Mii Gunner is guaranteed to be a pain no matter what. Honestly, I don't have too much matchup experience against good Mii Gunners, so I don't have the best tips to beat them, but this is one of the few matchups where you are more or less forced to play aggressively, so make sure you continuously mix up your pressure and approach options. Duck Hunt is another character that I don't have too much experience with against good players, but similarly to Mii Gunner, Duck Hunt forces you to approach, which Samus isn't great at. He can set up an almost impenetrable wall of projectiles, and frankly I hate this matchup because it generally devolves into me being really aggressive until I get a stock lead, and then being extremely defensive and campy to get some chip damage in and hopefully find an opening. Also, their up air is deadly. Avoid it pretty much at all costs. It's really bad for Samus. The good news is, Duck Hunt's disadvantage state is not that good, so I guess an aggressive playstyle works pretty well, but overall it's probably in my top 3 lamest matchups for Samus, but it's not unwinnable. Fox, Wolf, and Falco are all very consistently good against Samus, and everyone has their own opinion on which one is worse. It's honestly really difficult to say exactly how bad each of them are, but in my opinion, I would probably say that Wolf is the strongest spacey against Samus, with Fox coming in at a very close second. Wolf is kind of weird, as he has probably the worst disadvantage state out of the 3 spacies, but he can definitely keep up with trades for Samus, so going blow for blow against Wolf is not as good as versus the other 2. Wolf can also kill much easier than Fox and Falco, and his neutral game is pretty hard to deal with. His damage output is ridiculous, and his ability to string together forward airs, nairs, and up airs is very difficult to deal with. Zair is going to be key in this matchup, as pushing Wolf away from the center stage while keeping your distance is what you should be aiming for. Samus' up air is pretty good against Wolf, as it can abuse his pretty poor disadvantage state, and bombs are pretty good at dealing with aggression. Basically, play pretty patiently in neutral while keeping good stage positioning and control, but as soon as you get an opening, press your advantage as hard as you can. Fox gets comboed, knocked out, and edge-guarded or ledge-trapped pretty easily, and his hitboxes aren't the best, but his mix-up potential, close range and shield pressure, and even camping ability is all amazing. His mobility is extremely difficult to deal with, as Fox can play the runaway game when he's in the lead, and he can easily punish any of Samus's whiffs, and his ability to pressure your shield is extremely good. so slow the game down a little bit with defensive bombs, F-tilts, and Zairs, but be aware that once Fox gets a stock lead, he has no good reason to approach you, and he can just run away while lasering and reflecting your projectiles. However, remember that Fox definitely has some difficulty finding knockout opportunities, even at higher percents, and he can't do that if he's running away the whole time, so playing defensively with an aggressive mix-up here and there is probably the way to go. Palutena is also really annoying, as her aerial pressure and camping is phenomenal. You should never be above Palutena if you can avoid it, and you should be taking advantage of her tall hurtbox and relatively lightweight by spacing with Zairs and calling her out with safe back airs and tilts. Getting Palutena on the ledge is extremely good, and being on the ledge against her is extremely bad, so stay towards the center of the stage, preferably low to the ground, and try to trade hits and whittle her down. And once you have a lead, play defensively by whiff punishing and mind gaming her. By the way, up B out of shield works pretty well against Palutena's Nair, but don't get predictable with it, as experienced opponents will be wary of this. Alomar is in a strange place right now due to his recent nerfs, but for a few months I had considered Alomar the definitive most annoying character to play against a Samus. I haven't gotten a chance to test out this matchup too much since the patch, presumably because every Alomar has just switched to Joker or Rosa or Snake or something, but all jokes aside, his nerfs to his Hurtbox and Purple Pikmin is pretty huge. Anyway, Alomar controls the mid-range, but being either really far away or pretty darn close to him isn't that bad. It's still a super lame matchup, and a lot of times it boils down to a projectile war, but in my personal but pretty rare opinion, he isn't that hard as Samus anymore compared to other characters in this tier due to his low weight and poor disadvantage state. Starting the next tier off, we have Falco, whose Shine, Laser, and Juggling are all extremely threatening, and his damage output is pretty good. Zair is extremely important in this matchup to call out lasers and Shine in neutral, and it does a good job of contesting the mid-range. Like Fox, Falco struggles to knock out from mid-stage, so keeping stage control and playing defensively with bombs while not getting too far out of Zair range is how you should be playing this matchup. Greninja is a tricky but not that bad matchup. He can dash under most of your projectiles and aerials and combo you to oblivion, but his general game plan with punishing doesn't really work against a projectile camping Samus. Samus has better hitboxes and easily wins trades, and Greninja's out of shield game is pretty mediocre, which can be abused. Ness is only just barely in this tier, because if you have more matchup experience than the Ness player, you'll probably have an advantage, but with more experienced Ness players, this is maybe slightly in their favor. His down B and bat are certainly scary, particularly the Absorb, but more importantly, Ness has a lot of juggling and knockout power, but he does get knocked out easily, he loses trades, and is incredibly easy to gimp if you can get him off stage. As Samus, it's all about mind gaming around the Absorb and taking advantage of your heavy weight and high damage. Also, Zair is a great way to make Ness afraid of absorbing or F-smashing in neutral, and can push Ness towards the ledge for an edge guard or ledge trap. The main reasons why Inkling is a bit difficult for Samus are their small hurtbox and amazing mobility. You really have to time your moves properly so as not to whiff over Inkling's head, and it can be very difficult to get out of Inkling's combos and juggling. However, there's tons of counterplay in this matchup for Samus, particularly with Samus's bombs and charge shot, as bombs are amazing for holding off and punishing hyper-aggressive opponents, and Inkling is one of the many opponents that have an extremely difficult time dealing with them in neutral, offstage, and on the ledge. As long as you're careful with your bomb placement and avoid their falling up B hitbox, you can make getting out of disadvantage extremely difficult for Inkling, and you can build a wall of bombs combined with the threat of charge shot in order to stall off any paint you have on you. Young Link is another somewhat difficult matchup at higher skill levels, as his ability to convert out of mid-range projectiles, his shield pressure, and his quick moves and mobility all make it very difficult to get much going at the close or even mid-range. His bombs are particularly difficult to deal with, but he slightly loses camping wars and is more of a glass cannon than Samus, so playing defensively but going for early knockouts is key. As with other matchups, this is one where you want to play Samus relatively carefully and look for trading or read punish opportunities. Villager should almost certainly beat Samus on paper, but his low weight, difficulty getting natural knockouts, and his pretty darn poor ground game and mobility make it a relatively even matchup, but it's slightly in his favor. Of course you have to be careful to not let him pocket your charge shot, and his Lloyd Rocket is pretty annoying, but as long as you control center stage and stay away from being juggled or ledge trapped, you should be pretty much fine. Also, when you find yourself in a camping war, make your opponent constantly guess on whether you'll approach or continue to camp by using wave bounce or B-reverse charge shots. This will often create pretty good openings for you to get in. Also, this is a general and somewhat obvious note, but definitely save your double jump as long as possible off stage so that you don't get 0 to death at early percents because you wasted jump mid combo. Villager and Isabel's Fair and Bear can definitely do that if you aren't careful. So I definitely think that Samus has the tools to beat Joker, and the only things that are really scary about him are his juggling, his combo game, and mix-up. And of course the ridiculous damage from Arsene. He straight up loses trades without Arsene, and he struggles to get in. He also gets edge guarded and ledge trapped easily with or without his persona, and Samus has all the tools needed to stall the persona out. Anyway, watch my How to Beat Joker guide if you want to know more about this matchup. With his recent results in optimization, it's pretty tough for me to say that Joker is even, but it's not that disadvantageous of a matchup for Samus. Zero Suit Samus is also slightly disadvantageous for Samus. Her mobility and whip range is extremely difficult to deal with, especially her up airs. Charge Shot is going to be really powerful here, so playing around that and looking for Charge Shot openings is generally the move. Definitely don't overextend, so when you find an opening, do some safe damage and maybe make a read for a follow-up if you're confident, but usually you should be getting in only when it's safe, like after landing a projectile, doing a fair chunk of damage, and then safely resetting to neutral to maintain space and stage control. So I may be sleeping on this matchup due to lack of experience, but I think that Rosalina and Luma is just barely even. Her projectile absorb negates your ability to camp, but her disadvantages include having a tall body, low to medium weight, and a generally poor disadvantage state. You have to be a bit more aggressive at least early game in this matchup compared to others, at least until you get a lead, because even though Rosalina is sort of immune to projectile camping, she has no good way of actually forcing her opponent to approach her, and Rosa's approach game is mediocre at best. Mario is pretty darn even, but if you don't have any experience in this matchup, you'll probably have a really hard time. First off, Cape is super not safe for Mario to whiff, so baiting that is key. Use charge shots at ranges and times when your opponent doesn't expect it, and canceling charge shot into grab or an aerial will punish him hard if he tries to cape your non-existent charge shot at close range. Obviously you should never be above Mario, because if he lands one up air, you can bet that about 3 more up airs are going to land. However, Samus's weird combination of being both heavy and floaty make ladder combos pretty tricky, especially if they aren't used to fighting Samus. Basically just abuse Samus's tilts and aerials while keeping a safe spacing, because her hitboxes are both bigger and stronger than Mario's. Link can be really annoying if you don't know the matchup, but honestly more often than not, Link doesn't know the matchup either. Aside from his nair, jab, and down tilt, all of his moves are pretty slow to come out, so I actually think Samus wins at closer range. At mid-range, Zaire beats out pretty much anything Link does, and Charge Shot wins camping wars at long range. As long as you mix in these moves and you're mixing up the way that you dodge projectiles, you should be fine here. Also note his Hylian shield is usually not an issue, so just aim for his head and threaten with Zaire's if he tries to get cheeky with the shield. Pit and Dark Pit can be tricky due to their ability to disrupt your charging with arrows, and their side B is pretty good in this matchup. Bombs at the ledge are incredible for gimping the pits, as he's pretty easily edge guarded, and he usually has to either edge guard you or land a back air or smash attack to knock Samus out, so as long as you keep stage control and you're wary of his obvious kill moves, this shouldn't be too hard of a matchup. By the way, I think that Pit is slightly better than Dark Pit against Samus due to his more disruptive arrows, but both matchups are pretty dead even. Lucas's PK Fire is a harassing tool, not a combo starter like Ness's. Ness's PK Thunder is better at juggling, while Lucas's is better at gimping, but since Ness has Yo-Yo to cover the ledge, Ness is probably the better of the two versus Samus once you know the matchup, and Lucas doesn't have Ness's ridiculous back throw as a KO option. So really you can just play against Lucas just as you would against Ness, as long as you're aware of his differences from Ness, and it shouldn't be that bad of a matchup. Similar to Lucas, Isabel is basically a downgraded villager. She loses Camp Wars more than Villager. Her Fishing Rod and Lloyd Mines are less effective than Lloyd Rocket and Tree in this matchup, and despite her better mobility, her entire game plan basically boils down to back air and fair, which get demolished by a full charge shot or Zair. She's also lighter and dies to back air and nair at pretty early percents, but her slightly better mobility than Villager and her pocket is what makes this, I guess, pretty difficult, along with her fair and bear strings off stage, but otherwise it's pretty even. Pikachu is really not bad once you get used to the matchup. Pikachu's neutral B is really not threatening unless it's followed up with a tricky approach like Quick Attack. Pretty much all of Pika's hitboxes are outranged by Samus's normals. Pikachu dies pretty early to tons of Samus's moves, particularly up B, back air, nair, dash attack, and even F-tilt if spaced correctly. And Samus completely wins trades. Also, Samus's bombs are incredible at walling out Pikachu and creating combo setups, and a lot of times this can completely shut Pika down. But despite all this, Pikachu's combo game is so incredibly good, and being at close range or above Pikachu are really bad positions, so you definitely can't sleep on this matchup. At lower levels, I would put this slightly in Pikachu's favor, but as you learn the matchup, it becomes much more even. So for Pichu, no longer having a significantly smaller hurt box than Pikachu, having their knockout power slightly nerfed, and doing more self-damage with electric attacks makes this matchup much easier than before. Basically, if you play extremely defensively using bombs, tilts, and charge shot, you can slow the game down to the point where Pichu is quickly creeping up to knockout percent through chip damage, and you're still not even close to KO percent with your heavy weight. It's basically a war of attrition, and as long as you don't get continuously caught in lightning loops and down air spikes, this matchup is even at worst. I was tempted to put this as slightly in favor of Samus, but for now let's say it's even. There are still a few more even matchups, but I'll go over that in a part 2, which should be coming out Wednesday or Thursday at the latest. I'll also be going over the rest of Samus's matchups, so it should be slightly longer than this one, and I'll be giving my general thoughts about Samus in the meta. Anyway, thanks for watching, and peace.